A Princeton study found that financial stress costs people the equivalent of 13 IQ points. That's more than pulling an all-nighter. And it doesn't matter how much you actually have in your bank account, the stress hits people earning $40,000 the same way it hits people earning $120,000. Which means there are people making six figures right now who are making the exact same panicked, short-term financial decisions as someone who's genuinely broke. And if you've ever gotten a raise, a real one, not the 3% nonsense, and found yourself thinking 6 months later, wait, where did it go? Then you are one of those people, and the reason has nothing to do with your income, your discipline, or how good you are with numbers. The reason is something your brain is doing to you right now, something it will keep doing forever unless you understand exactly what it is. Because here's the part nobody tells you. The feeling of being poor is not caused by being poor. It's caused by a set of psychological mechanisms that run completely on autopilot, and they work just as hard on wealthy people as they do on broke ones, maybe harder. This video is about those mechanisms, and once you see them, you cannot unsee them. My name is Nick, and I spend way too much time thinking about the psychology of money. Specifically, why intelligent, hard-working people can earn good money their entire lives and still feel financially stuck, anxious, and like they're one bad month away from disaster. If you're someone who knows you should be doing better financially than you actually are, and you can't quite figure out why, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up changing the way you see your own relationship with money. I want to start with a number that's going to bother you. People who earn $75,000 a year, which is roughly the top 30% of American earners, report feeling only marginally better about their finances than people earning $40,000. Not dramatically better, not problem solved, marginally. And that's not an anomaly. That pattern holds almost all the way up the income ladder. There's a concept in psychology called subjective financial well-being, and the research from the American Psychological Association is unambiguous. Your perceived financial stress is a stronger predictor of your actual financial behavior than your actual financial situation. Let me say that again, because it's genuinely wild. How stressed you feel about money affects your financial choices more than how much money you actually have. So we have millions of people making objectively decent money, walking around making the same panicked short-term financial decisions as someone who genuinely can't pay rent, not because they're irresponsible, not because they don't understand compounding, but because they feel financially anxious in a way that their bank balance alone cannot fix. And that anxiety is pushing them into decisions that guarantee they'll keep feeling this way. Here's the part that will reframe this entire conversation. You cannot save or earn your way out of this feeling. People have tried. The data is very clear on what happens when they do, and it's not what you'd expect. At some point, you have to ask, if it's not the income, what is it? Something else is going on, and it has a name. Quick question before we go further. Think about the best purchase you made in the last 2 years. Something you really wanted. How does owning it feel right now compared to the day you got it? If the answer is, honestly, I barely think about it anymore, that's not a coincidence. That's the mechanism we're about to talk about. It's called hedonic adaptation, and it is, without question, the most underrated force in personal finance. Here's how it works. Your brain is a prediction machine. Its entire job is to model what the world looks like and flag things that are different from that model, things that are better or worse than expected. When something good happens, you get a raise, you buy a nicer car, you move into a bigger apartment, your brain registers that as a positive deviation from the norm. You feel great, you feel rich, but your brain updates its baseline almost immediately. The new salary becomes the new normal. The nicer car becomes just your car. The bigger apartment is just where you live. And now your brain is back to looking for deviations from this new, higher baseline, which means it takes more to impress it, more to feel the same level of satisfaction, more to feel financially comfortable. This is why lottery winners, and I know this sounds insane, report roughly the same levels of happiness as the general population within 18 months of winning. 18 months! If a multi-million-dollar windfall can't outrun your brain's baseline reset, what exactly do you think a $15,000 raise is going to do? Now apply this to your own life. Think about the first time you made $50,000 a year. Do you remember how that felt? Pretty good, right? Now imagine you woke up tomorrow and your salary had been quietly cut back to $50,000. You'd probably feel devastated, even though that number once felt like success. That gap between where your baseline is and where your income is, that's the trap. And most people keep expanding their lifestyle to fill any gap that opens up, which means the gap never actually closes. And here's the really uncomfortable part. The gap doesn't close with more income, it just resets. Every single time.
Let me put some numbers to this so it hits properly. Say you're 28 years old and you get your first real corporate job at $60,000 a year. Take home after taxes is around $48,000. Call it $4,000 a month. You find an apartment for $1,400 a month, you get a used car, maybe $350 a month, groceries, utilities, phones, subscriptions, another $800. You go out with friends, live your life, another $600 or so. You're spending about $3,150 a month and saving $850. Not bad. Now fast forward 3 years. You've been promoted. You're making $82,000. Take home is around $5,400 a month. You got a raise of about $1,400 a month in take-home pay. But here's what actually happened. You moved to a nicer apartment, $1,950 a month. You needed a more reliable car, now $580 a month. You're eating out more because, well, you work hard. You upgraded your phone plan. You started a few more streaming subscriptions. You travel a little more. Your lifestyle spending crept from $3,150 to $4,600 a month. You're now saving $800 a month. Less than you were saving 3 years ago on $60,000. And every month, you look at your bank account and you feel stuck. You feel like no matter how hard you work, you can never get ahead. But the math is right there. You didn't fall behind because you didn't earn enough. You fell behind because your lifestyle consumed the raise before you even noticed it was happening. This is what researchers call lifestyle inflation, or lifestyle creep. And a 2023 survey by Empower found that 45% of Americans said their spending increased when their income increased, and most of them couldn't identify specific purchases that caused it. That's the terrifying part. The money disappears in aggregate. It's not one big bad decision, it's 100 small upgrades that each felt completely reasonable in the moment. That is not a discipline problem, that is a design problem. Your brain is designed to normalize upward spending automatically. The upgrade happens before you even decide to upgrade. Here's where I want you to do something uncomfortable. Open Instagram right now, or TikTok, or whatever you actually use, and scroll for 60 seconds. Don't interact with anything, just scroll. And as you do, notice what your brain is quietly doing in the background. Notice what it's clocking as normal. What kitchens look like, what vacations look like, what cars people drive, what restaurants people go to. Because that 60-second scroll just updated your brain's financial reference point, and it did it without asking your permission. Humans are not wired to evaluate their financial situation in isolation. We are wired, evolutionarily, deeply wired, to evaluate our situation relative to the people around us. For most of human history, that was adaptive. If your neighbor had more food than you, that was survival-relevant information. Your brain needed to feel uneasy about it. The problem is that in 2026, your neighbor is no longer the family next door. Your reference group, the people your brain is unconsciously benchmarking you against, is now anyone whose life appears in your feed. Anyone whose vacation photos, kitchen renovation, and new car your brain registers as data about what normal looks like. A 2022 study found that people who spent more time on social media reported significantly lower financial satisfaction, independent of their actual income. It didn't matter what they earned. More scrolling directly correlated with feeling more financially inadequate. But here's the part that actually breaks my brain. The people in the feed making you feel broke are probably also scrolling someone else's feed feeling broke. The people you see online are not a representative sample of the population. They're a heavily filtered collection of peak moments, aspirational purchases, and curated highlight reels. Your brain doesn't process them as highlight reel. It processes them as reality, and it recalibrates your expectations accordingly. Research from the Federal Reserve Bank of Philadelphia found that people who live in zip codes where surrounding income recently increased without their own income changing were more likely to take on debt and decrease their savings rate. Their neighbors got richer, they felt poorer, and they responded by spending more to close a gap that existed entirely in perception.
Here's something most people don't realize about the purchases they make when they feel financially anxious. When you feel behind, when you feel like everyone around you is doing better, like you're not where you should be by your age, your brain looks for ways to signal status to yourself and to others. This is called compensatory consumption, and it's the single biggest driver of luxury spending among people who actually can't afford luxury. Think about who buys the most expensive sneakers. Is it wealthy people? No. Wealthy people buy New Balance and don't care. It's people in the middle, people who feel like they're not quite where they want to be, who spend disproportionately on visible, status-signaling goods. A 2014 study in the Journal of Consumer Research found that people who felt socially excluded or low status were significantly more likely to purchase luxury goods, not as a reward, but as a psychological defense mechanism. I may feel broke, but I have the same iPhone as someone making 3 times my salary. And look, I'm not judging this. It's deeply human, but you need to understand that this mechanism is actively working against your ability to build wealth. Every dollar you spend on a status signal is a dollar that stops working for you. And here's the part that makes this a genuine trap rather than just a bad habit. The purchase temporarily relieves the anxiety. For a few days, maybe a week, you feel better, which means your brain logs it as a successful coping strategy, which means next time the anxiety spikes, and it will, the urge to buy something visible and expensive spikes with it. You're not being irresponsible, you're being conditioned. And the cruel irony is that the purchases you make to feel less poor are often the exact reason you stay poor. Here's a concept from behavioral economics that will reframe how you think about this entire thing. Psychologists Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky developed something called prospect theory, and one of its core findings is that humans don't evaluate wealth in absolute terms. We evaluate it relative to a reference point, and losses from that reference point hurt roughly twice as much as equivalent gains feel good. What this means practically, the pain you feel from having $500 less than you expected to have is psychologically about twice as strong as the satisfaction of having $500 more than expected. So when your lifestyle creeps up and your reference point rises with it, every small financial shortfall, every month your savings aren't where you thought they'd be, registers as a painful loss, not just a neutral outcome. Your brain generates a genuine stress response. And that stress response is not metaphorical. Research from Harvard and Princeton published in Science magazine found that financial stress measurably reduces cognitive bandwidth, the mental capacity you have for complex decisions, by the equivalent of 13 IQ points. To put that in terms that hit differently, a person earning $80,000 who feels financially behind is making investment and spending decisions with the same cognitive capacity as someone who pulled an all-nighter every month, indefinitely. So the feeling of being poor, even when you're not, doesn't just feel bad, it literally makes you worse at making financial decisions, which leads to worse outcomes, which makes you feel poorer. Round and round. This is the loop nobody talks about, and it's the reason that income alone will never solve this.
Before I give you the 4 things that actually work, I need you to honestly answer this. Has knowing about lifestyle inflation ever stopped you from lifestyle inflating? Has understanding that you shouldn't compare yourself to people online ever stopped you from feeling worse after scrolling? Probably not, and that's the point. Information doesn't fix this. You can know everything I've told you in this video and still have your brain run these programs on autopilot tomorrow morning. What fixes this is changing the inputs your brain receives and changing the feedback loops it uses to evaluate success. Here's what that actually looks like. Step 1. Freeze your lifestyle for 90 days. Not forever, 90 days. Every time your income goes up, before you let any of it touch your lifestyle, put it somewhere you can't easily access it. Increase your 401k contribution. Open a separate high-yield savings account and set up automatic transfers. The money needs to leave your checking account before your brain can convince you that you need something. Here's the math on why this matters. If you're 30 years old and you capture just $500 extra per month from a raise instead of letting lifestyle inflation absorb it, and you invested at a historical average of 8% annually, that $500 a month becomes roughly $745,000 by the time you're 65. Not from working harder, not from finding some secret investment, from just not letting your lifestyle eat the raise. Step 2. Audit your reference group. This is uncomfortable but necessary. For 30 days, track how you feel after spending time on different social media platforms. Not what you think intellectually, how you actually feel emotionally about your financial situation afterward. Most people find a pretty direct correlation between certain feeds and financial anxiety. You don't have to delete everything, but curating what your brain uses as its benchmark for normal is one of the highest leverage moves you can make. Follow people who talk about building wealth quietly. Follow people who brag about their index fund returns, not their lease payments. Step 3. Redefine your scorecard. Here's the thing about status signals. They're only effective if you care about the audience. Most people are spending money to impress people who are too busy worrying about their own status to notice. The solution isn't to stop caring what people think, it's to change what you want them to think. Start tracking net worth, not income, not possessions, net worth. Write it down every month. Let that number become the thing you take pride in. Because here's what wealthy people actually know. The goal is never to look rich. The goal is to be free. And those two things are, more often than not, in direct competition with each other. Step 4. Create separation between emotion and spending. Build a 48-hour rule for any non-essential purchase over $100, not because you can't afford it, maybe you can, but because you want to make sure the purchase is coming from genuine desire, not from anxiety or social comparison or compensatory consumption. You'd be amazed how many things you desperately wanted on a Tuesday that you completely forgot about by Thursday. Here's the counterintuitive part of all 4 of these. None of them require you to earn more. None of them require you to sacrifice things you actually care about. They require you to stop doing things that your brain convinced you mattered, but you never actually chose. There is a version of your financial life that looks almost identical from the outside, feels dramatically better on the inside, and compounds into generational wealth over 30 years. The only thing separating you from it is not income, it's autopilot. Look, I want to leave you with something that I think about a lot. The feeling of being poor is one of the most effective traps ever designed, and what makes it so effective is that it's entirely invisible. Nobody sat down and engineered it. It emerged from the collision of our ancient evolutionary psychology with a modern world of infinite social comparison, aggressive marketing, and instant gratification. And the people who escape it aren't the ones who made more money. They're the ones who understood the game they were actually playing. The game isn't about income, it's about the gap between what you earn and what you need to feel okay. And that gap is, to a very significant degree, something you can control, not by working harder, but by understanding what your brain is doing and refusing to let it run on autopilot. The most financially dangerous thing you can do is hand your brain the controls and hope it makes good decisions. It won't. It'll chase comfort, status, and short-term relief every single time.
But the moment you take those controls back, the moment you understand why you feel the way you feel and make a deliberate choice about what you actually want your financial life to look like, that's when everything starts to change. Not because you earned more, because you finally stopped feeling like you needed to. If this video gave you something to think about, hit that thumbs up. It genuinely helps this channel more than most people realize. And if you want to go deeper on the psychology side of wealth building, I've got a video on why your brain keeps you stuck in financial survival mode that I think you'll find very useful. I'll see you in the next one.